Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber C-Risk Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. A business impact analysis, or BIA, is the foundation of resilience planning. It helps organizations understand the consequences of disruption to their most critical business processes and supporting assets. A proper BIA answers the question, what happens if this process stops, and how quickly must it be restored to prevent major damage? The focus is not on the probability of disruption, but on the severity and timing of the impact that makes BIA different from standard risk assessments. BIA defines how long a business can tolerate loss of function or data, helping shape decisions about continuity, disaster recovery, and control investment. In the C-Risk framework, BIA is the go-to input for determining business impact, not for predicting how likely something is to go wrong. When you see exam questions asking which system is most critical or how to determine recovery objectives, you are likely working with BIA decisions. BIA is essential to risk management because it helps organizations prioritize what really matters during a crisis. It draws a clear line between what is important and what is urgent. When systems fail or disasters strike, not everything can be recovered at once. BIA shows which processes must come first, which systems require redundancy, and where investments in resilience will yield the greatest return. It helps link IT risks to business outcomes, such as lost revenue, legal violations, customer dissatisfaction, or damaged reputation. BIA supports risk tolerance discussions by highlighting which disruptions the organization can absorb and which ones it cannot. On the C-Risk exam, poor BIA design often shows up as misallocated recovery resources, delayed restoration, or failure to meet regulatory obligation. The correct answer usually restores prioritization, revalidates assumptions, or connects recovery time to impact. To apply BIA properly, you need to know its core concepts and terms. Recovery time objective, or RTO, defines the maximum acceptable downtime for a process. Recovery point objective, or RPO, defines the maximum acceptable data loss in terms of time, how far back in time a system can be restored without significant harm. Criticality refers to how essential a process is to business survival, legal obligations, or customer commitments. Impact types include financial damage, reputational harm, regulatory penalties, and customer service disruption. These concepts shape how C-Risk professionals score and prioritize business functions. On the exam, expect questions that test your ability to match functions with their RTOs, assess impact severity, or determine whether a risk aligns with stated recovery objectives. Know these terms well. They are part of the C-Risk vocabulary of resilience. The BIA process itself follows a structured path. Step 1 is identifying the business functions and supporting assets. This includes processes, systems, data sets, and dependencies. Step 2 is determining how critical each function is and mapping its upstream and downstream dependencies. Step 3 is estimating the impact of disruption across operational, financial, reputational, and legal dimensions. Step 4 is defining the recovery objectives, documenting the RTO and RPO for each function. Step 5 is validating and documenting results with stakeholders. This ensures that recovery priorities reflect real business needs, not just IT assumptions. A completed BIA becomes a cornerstone of recovery planning, but it's not one and done. It must be revisited periodically, especially after changes in operations, systems, or risk posture. On the C-Risk exam, scenarios involving failed recovery often point back to incomplete or outdated BIAs. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Gathering BIA data requires input from multiple sources. Interviews and surveys with process owners and subject matter experts provide insight into functional priorities and pain points. Review of incident reports, financial loss records, and customer service level agreements adds evidence-based perspective. Dependency mapping shows which systems support which functions and what must be recovered in what order. BIA workshops create collaborative spaces where different business units can agree on recovery timelines and tolerable loss. On the exam, be alert for scenarios where the BIA was built using only IT input or where key stakeholders were not consulted. The correct response typically expands data sources, restores balance, or incorporates cross-functional insight. BIA is only as strong as its inputs, and C-risk professionals are expected to ensure complete. Analyzing and prioritizing business functions based on BIA findings involves impact scoring across time intervals. This means determining how much damage would result from a process being down for 1 hour, 1 day, or 1 week. High-impact functions, with short tolerance windows, are prioritized for immediate restoration. Low-impact functions may be deferred. Visual tools such as impact over time graphs, dependency matrices, or tiered recovery charts help communicate this clearly. The prioritization process must balance criticality with recovery feasibility. On the C-risk exam, RTO violations, where actual downtime exceeds the documented objective, usually indicate misaligned planning. Choose responses that restore alignment between BIA findings and recovery plans. The goal is not just to react to failure, but to plan based on what the business actually needs to survive disruption. BIA is not separate from risk assessment. It's a key part of it. While risk analysis considers threats and likelihood, BIA defines the business impact. BIA outputs are used to assign consequence scores in risk assessments, helping clarify which risks are high priority. Scenarios developed in Domain 2 often use BIA data to estimate what would happen if a disruption occurred. BIA also helps distinguish between risks that require mitigation and those that can be monitored or accepted. In Domains 3 and 4, BIA supports treatment planning and control selection. C-risk professionals must be able to link recovery requirements to control effectiveness and risk tolerance. On the exam, expect to apply BIA outputs when evaluating control strategies, assigning risk ratings, or making escalation decisions. If the BIA is missing, the analysis is incomplete. In resilience planning, BIA serves as the guide for building continuity programs, designing disaster recovery strategies, and implementing manual workarounds. It informs which systems require hot sites, what data must be backed up daily, and what staffing models are needed for crisis operations. BIA guides investment decisions. Should we harden this system, replicate that process, or accept a temporary workaround? It also validates whether the current state of controls can meet the tolerance thresholds defined by business leaders. When BIAs are inaccurate or outdated, the result is failed continuity plans, missed compliance deadlines, or critical systems offline beyond acceptable limits. On the C-risk exam, poor BIA inputs often lead to planning breakdowns. The right answer typically revalidates recovery needs or proposes improvements based on impact, timing, and severity. Despite its importance, BA execution is vulnerable to several common mistakes. One is treating BAI as an IT-only exercise. While IT plays a key role, the priorities must come from the business side. Another mistake is relying solely on self-reported data, especially when it's not validated against actual impact records. Using outdated process maps or inventories creates blind spots. Ignoring interdependencies between business units can result in recovery plans that overlook critical sequences. For example, restoring a sales system before the order management platform is useless. On the C-risk exam, you will often see these mistakes described indirectly, such as delays, surprises, or gaps in continuity. Choose answers that expand input quality, update BIA documentation, or improve cross-functional coordination. Certain scenario patterns are clear signals that BIA understanding is being tested. If the question asks, which function should be prioritized, match the answer to highest criticality and shortest RTO. If you read recovery exceeded tolerance, that's a signal the BIA was flawed or never referenced. If it asks, which data source was missing, stakeholder interviews or impact records are often the gap. If the scenario says, how should the BIA inform response, select the answer that matches controls to required recovery levels. C-risk questions involving BIA are less about naming the steps and more about applying them. The best answers tie impact clarity to readiness, helping the business plan not just recover. A strong BIA doesn't just describe disruption, It prevents disaster from becoming collapse. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyber Risk Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.